Joseph and Monique, thank you so much for sitting down for this conversation with me. I want to give a little bit of the backstory. You can help me to do that about how we got to know each other. So for our friends at home, Joseph and Monique González, about a year ago, we were looking ahead to the celebration for Our Lady Guadalupe at the Abbey and putting together a program, some talks that the confreres would give in the evening for 3 days, kind of a triduum of preparation for the celebration at the Abbey of Our Lady's Great Feast, which is really an important feast at our Abbey and getting more important every year. And more important, I think, as a site of pilgrimage for the Feast of Our Lady Guadalupe in Southern California. So looking ahead to that, I wanted to put together personally a few homilies, let's say sermons. And I pulled a book off the library shelf at the Abbey that was a book I hadn't seen before on Our Lady. And it happened to have been your book, which was recently published on the flower world and some of the wonderful backstory of why Our Lady appeared as she appeared. And so I read that book very avidly with great interest, and it was very edifying. And I took ideas out of that book to prepare my sermons. So then you take the story from there, because you happened to, I think, hear that sermon or one of those?
I was searching through YouTube, and we do it once in a while just to see, is there any mention of Flower World out in the wild? And I ran across this YouTube video where you were talking about Our Lady of Guadalupe, but you were talking about the flower song poems and this beautiful afterlife idea that the indigenous of Mexico had. And I said, Monique, come over here. I think he's talking about our book. And so then we talked. We said, okay, it has to be our book. We have to contact this priest, Father Ambrose. We didn't know you at the time, and we knew of you, but we contacted you, and then we just happened to meet at the
We
St.
met at the
Michael's
end.
Abbey.
That's right.
Yeah,
And
it was
so,
really
and
great.
we've been in touch since then by email and also a few times in person. And really that new friendship that we've been working on now for about the last year, a little less than last year, has given birth really to this project which we're presenting today, and this program about Our Lady and these wonderful interviews here in Mexico City and elsewhere. And so thank you very, very much for reaching out, and thank you for all of the wonderful research, amazing research that you both have put into this project of your book, because I can tell already that Our Lady is blessing it just simply in the people whom I've met, whom we've been able to meet because of your research. And you have so many amazing contacts in amongst the experts of, as we say here, the Guadalupe event and everything around it, the history, the prehistory of this event and what's happened since then. So thank you for this collaboration, and thank you for this conversation.
No, thank you very much. It's been an absolute
much.
ride, but really wonderful.
It is. We don't quite know what to expect day by day, but Our Lady and God's providence seem to be putting together for us a really beautiful collaboration. So let's talk about some of the highlights of your research, because I think that it will help our viewers and listeners, and it'll help really so many people who love Our Lady of Guadalupe to know more about her, to know how they can appreciate what her intervention in history meant, and why the people of Mesoamerica were so ready to receive her message and the gospel that she brought. So let's talk about that. And I have my ideas about where we might go, but I'm sure you do too. So where do you think we should dive in first?
Well, we could talk about the way that God has worked in history in other areas of the world, especially when he steps into the picture and the gospel message reaches pagan cultures. There's accepted Catholic Christian doctrine called preparatio evangelica, which is evangelical preparation. Basically, the idea is that God implants concepts and ideas into pagan cultures so that when the gospel message reaches them, there's something that they could grab onto, a concept, because maybe it's blood atonement, maybe it's something else, where it provides a bridge of understanding for those pagan cultures to be able to convert to Christianity. Now, in regards to our research, all nations really live within mythical structures. And in pagan myth, it really talks about the spiritual experience of a people. For example, the relationship to the land, ideas about life after death, perhaps even their destiny. Well, the early Christian fathers thought about these structures, and they realized that the gospel message does not negate those pagan structures, it fulfills it. Mm-hmm. So they came up with this concept, evangelical preparation, and realized that the seeds and concepts are implanted in these cultures which eventually blossom. In fact, Justin Martyr said that the seeds of the Logos are implanted in every culture. Mm-hmm. And that's what we believe and what we're basically saying in our book that happened here in the Americas.
Oh, great. Okay, so this evangelical preparation, the seeds of the gospel that need to be watered so that they can bear fruit in the salvation of the souls of the people in these, as you said, pagan or pre-Christian peoples. Where do we find that represented, or where do you see those? Where do you identify those seeds in the pre-Christian Mesoamerican peoples?
Well, it begins with an interdisciplinary study called Flower Worlds.
Okay.
And what that is in the last 30 years, and it started with a linguist by the name of Jane Hill, an anthropologist, and she discovered among the song poems of the peoples of the American Southwest and of Mesoamerica that they're all talking about this paradisal realm that's filled with color and light. Everything is seen, the rocks, the earth. It's an otherworldly realm. And as she continued digging into all the different peoples, like the Hopi, like the Shoshone, like the Paiute, as well as the people of Mesoamerica, they all share these different characteristics in common. And she coined the term to describe this place, Flower World. Now, at that time, this is 1992, when she first introduced the idea, she then put it out to the rest of the scholars, like, can you disprove my theory? And what happened was archaeologists decided to take that concept and see if they could find it within structures, archaeological structures. And as they did so, they found that it actually did. So you'll see it in Chichen Itza, you'll see it in Teotihuacan, you'll see it in the American Southwest. A lot of the same characteristics in physical relief form.
I see.
And by the nature of that, they were able to expand it because they discovered that it's actually among the Olmecs, which is the most ancient mother culture of the Americas. It goes back approximately 3,000 years. And they all had these similar characteristics. They began to understand a little more fully how that flower world came to be. So for those who aren't familiar, the Olmecs were about approximately 3,000 years ago. So we're talking about 1500 AD, 1900 AD.
8 BC.
BC, sorry. Before Christ. So in the context of that, they were able to start hard dating more of the material culture and beginning to understand more of this indigenous belief system of this paradisal realm. And over the process of that, they discovered one symbol in particular that exemplified this flower world, and it's the four-petaled flower.
Okay.
And they realized that this four-petaled flower signified a great deal. To begin with, just to give some context, those four petals represent the cardinal directions that we're familiar with, the known world. So north, south, east, and west for each of those petals. But then they discovered that there was deep meaning in the center of the flower, that it, in their mind, a vertical access went up into the heavens. And that was a way that they could access that paradisal realm, was through this image of the four-petal flower, which kind of informs all the other material culture around it.
Interesting.
And so over time, that idea morphs physically in archaeological form. So first you'll see four-petal flowers in caves.
Okay.
So you'll see first a four-petal flower over a tunnel for a cave that goes into the depth of a mountain. And within those mountains, they're finding these huge caverns in the shape of a four-petal flower. And over time, you see that getting larger and expanding into temples. Like at Teotihuacan, for anybody who's familiar, this is an ancient civilization that existed between 250 BC and approximately 600 to 900 AD, so that's about 850 years and more. And they have these huge temples. It's about 45 miles northeast, outside of the city of Mexico. And they discovered that specifically the Temple of the Sun and the Temple of Quetzalcoatl that were shaped as temples. They initially thought they were tombs, but as more research was enveloped, they realized that they weren't tombs. That they actually had passageways running from east to west into the center of these temples. And so now archaeologists are reinterpreting their old studies
Okay.
in light of this flower wheel concept. And to today, because those tunnels were lined with many of the same characteristics, there's like jades and emeralds and pyrite lining the inside of these tunnels that are shining off light when there's water with them and there's candles lit. So it looks like the night sky.
I see. So this is a kind of a physical representation, the temples, and also so these underground caves and passages from these various pre-Christian cultures, physical representation for religious purposes, perhaps, of these ideas about the afterlife. Is that what this means? Do the archaeologists think?
Yes, I think that because it was so strange that for example, the pyramids of Teotihuacan were not burial places, that they were more ritualistic, that they needed a methodology or some way to be able to explain why is this cave going to the middle of the Pyramid of the Sun and going off into four lobes like a four-petaled flower, where they had already seen this image in pottery shards. There's a big 6-foot one carved on the side of a mountain in Guatemala. They were seeing this four-petaled flower everywhere, so they came up with the idea of the Axis Mundi, that it was really a connection from heaven and earth. But it was through beauty, and it was through the symbol of the flower. So the flower, they guessed, had this sort of metaphorical, or metaphysical rather, connection to the heavens via beauty through this symbol of the flower. And they believe that as we move forward, and we're jumping a little bit ahead because the poems reflect this, but that the going up would go to this place called Inxochitlalpan, Intonacatlalpan, which means the flower wheel paradise, more or less. But the bottom would be going down to a dreary underworld called Mixtlan. So as we progress forward, we're going to see this kind of transcendental connection via beauty to divine things in the next era that we're going to be talking about.
Okay, that's amazing. So we have this insight into the interpretation of archaeological remains, which goes along with, as you just suggested, Joseph, a connection with poems, extant poems, which I think are also songs, song poems
yes.
written that describe some of this that is then evidenced or evinced in the archaeology. So why don't we talk about those song poems? We've already heard about this a little bit in other conversations in our series, and it seems like this is a really key part of the pre-Christian culture. Some places it was a very high culture. Where did song poetry fit into that?
Well, when we start getting into the Nahua period, which is around 600 AD, this is when various groups from northern Mexico and the American Southwest moved into the Valley of Mexico. The most famous one being the Mexica or the Aztecs. But there were other groups, the Texcocans, who were actually second in power in the Aztec Empire. They were really responsible for carrying on a lot of flower world traditions, such as the arranging of beautiful feathers or the building of beautiful gardens, which the king of Texcoco, King Nezahualcóyotl, had done. But probably most importantly would be the composing and the performing of flower song poetry. Now, these flower song poems, we know about 180 of them. 90 of them are in one book or collection called the Cantares Mexicanos, which refers to the people of the Nahua during that time period. But these song poems talk about many things. Many of them are historical. Many of them kind of reflect the news of the day, like maybe some famous battle that occurred or the exploits of some king, for example. But a significant number of them are flower song poems. So what do these flower song poems talk about? They seem to have four themes in common to them. The transcendental aspect of a flower, as we kind of already discussed. They talk about flowers coming down from heaven so they can sing flowers. It's kind of strange, but really what they're saying is that inspiration comes from a place that's not of this earth. In fact, they say where it comes from. It comes from a flower world paradise, which is in Xochitlalpan, in Tunacatlalpan. Xochitl means flower. Xochitlalpan means a flower paradise, but when you pair it with Tonacatlalpan, Tona means heat or energy. It's also the word for the sun, Tonatiu, Tonacatlalpan. But when you combine these two phrases together, it really means the place of ultimate beauty, ultimate creativity, and perhaps the origin of our people, and perhaps the place that we want to go to after we die. So the flower wood paradise, a one supreme God that is referred to as Intlokenawake, which is either the God of far and near or near and far. Ipanemwani, the giver of life, is there. But it's the place, as my wife already explained, the place of ultimate beauty, ultimate joy, beautiful words that, songs that are being sung. However, there's a little bit of a trick to it. There's worthiness. Who actually gets to go there? And that's a little bit of the rub, which we can discuss.
Okay, so far we have a few big topics that we've discussed that I want to just enumerate to keep to clarify what we've been saying. So we have the importance of the four-petaled flower and the idea of flowers and beauty and that connection with the transcendent from this world to the next through this avenue of beauty and specifically flowers. We have the flower world paradise, which is not only something about the afterlife, but also the inspiration about where we can be in communion with it now through something like the inspiration to be able to compose a song poem, or the dances that go along with that. And then we have the idea of one's worthiness to have access to that world, either by way of inspiration now or in the afterlife after one dies. Okay. What else am I missing by way of key ideas?
Well, in particular, there's one poem. What's very interesting about it in the collection from the Cantares Mexicanos, there's a song at the very beginning. It's called the Cuica Pecayot. That can either mean the origin of the songs, or the principle of the songs, or the beginning of the songs. Okay. Now, this song really is set apart from all the other flower songs. The other flower songs, people think came later because they may talk about a king that is known in the 1400s, for example, and it even says that he was either reigning during the time of the composition of the piece, or he was actually the composer himself. Okay. This earlier song is so interesting because it's a narrative, and people say that it's actually could perhaps be the underlying myth of this whole flower world concept. And
I would explain.
Yeah, Monique will explain what it is.
So the way this story starts, it starts off with a singer. And he's standing in an area and he says, I ponder within my heart, where can I find the holy fragrant flowers, the ones that can please the heart? And so he asks the troupial butterfly, he asks the roseate swan, he asks a number of different birds where he can find them, because it's his hope that if he could find these flowers, he would fill his tilma with these various flowers and carry it down as a message to the princes to make their hearts happy so that they can in turn share it with the rest of the world.
I love it.
But what's interesting is nobody knows how to take him there, but one does, very specifically a golden hummingbird. And the golden hummingbird says, come with me, I'll take you there. So the hummingbird takes him within the mountain. This is in the Nahua. It's very particular, and we'll explain a little bit further why this is significant, but takes this singer into the mountain where he believes he finds the flowers, and he puts them in his tilma.
Okay.
And he thinks he's going to bring it down for the princess, to flower crown the princess. But there's a problem. He realizes that he didn't actually go there. And he explains why. He says, how could someone who is unworthy and who is nothing and who is afflicted and who transgresses on earth find the flowers of this flower world paradise? And at the same time he's lamenting this, he then goes on to say, there is someone who can make you worthy. The God of far and near can make you worthy to go into this flower world paradise. And so he ends in a lament because he couldn't go there, but he's hoping at some point someone can go there. And so the song ends with him saying, I wish I could go there. I wish I could gather the holy sweet flowers, because with these flowers, only their fragrance, intoxicating fragrance, can make you happy.
That's amazing.
And that's how it ends. with this hope.
I have questions. So when I first heard about this, of course, the Catholic Christian heart immediately rushes ahead to what we know about the apparitions of Guadalupe, right? You think, okay, my goodness, there's so much of this is the same, gathering flowers in a tilma, wondering if he is worthy enough to be able to receive this message, wanting to show these flowers to the princes, and obviously there is a clear, at least to me, I'm not a scholar of these things, but a clear connection between the way the events in 1531 unfolded and these almost prophetic religious song poem ideas about what people were hoping for, written. When do we think was that written? Do we know?
Some people have made the case that it's very ancient.
That is
at least as ancient as the belief system is itself.
Okay.
So there have been scholars have said.
And not to go too much into a tangent, but because of that phrase that Monique just said, that the word in Nahua is tepe etik. Tepe means mountain or hill, and etik means within a mountain.
Okay.
Which is a very strange place to find the flower world paradise.
Inside a mountain.
Inside a mountain.
Inside
But
a mountain.
it
within
sounds a little bit like what we were speaking about at the beginning of the conversation, the four-petaled flower, which is a portal into a passageway into the earth for some religious purpose. And so there's something about this connection already inside a mountain or inside a cave, right?
Absolutely. See, these discoveries from the Pyramid of the Sun, that would happen in 1981.
Okay.
And it took them about a decade to actually find what was underneath the pyramid once they dug it out. The same thing happened with the Pyramid of the Plumed Serpent. They didn't dig out not until the mid 2010s. I think it was 2014, something like that. So these are new discoveries. So, for example, when the first translation of the flower song poems happened, which was in 1985, it was such a strange thing to say within a mountain is the flower world paradise, because those discoveries hadn't happened yet. So that translator, John Bierhauer, said within a valley you find the flower world paradise. So, but to make that connection, as you had already done, that with these ancient discoveries, which we know happened much longer ago, that probably this flower song poem is ancient.
But it also sounds like this this word for this place sounds exactly like tepeyac, doesn't it? Is it the same word?
Yeah, it's tepe. Tepe means hill, tepeyac, or tepeyacak, which actually means the nose of the hill.
Okay.
Tepeyatik means inside, within the mountain.
Within the mountain.
Yes.
So obviously, obviously, Our Lady appeared where she appeared on purpose, in order to make it clear to the people who knew that flower song that you just recited so beautifully, or portions of it, Monique, so that people would understand what was going on when she appeared to St. Juan Diego and what she was bringing.
Yeah, just to step back a little bit.
Okay.
If we look at the Cuicapecayot, the origin of the songs, what is going on there? What is the underlying message? Well, the singer is looking for flowers, but as what we were talking about, that the flowers come down and they represent truth. There's actually so many flower song poems that say, what we speak here on earth is only a dream. We do not speak the truth here. And one flower song poem says, the flowers that come down from heaven are the only truth on earth. So they're really relating this inspiration, this feeling, or this artistic desire to be able to come and live in inspiration is truth. And so the singer metaphorically is looking for truth. The flowers mean the truth. So it's kind of like a goal. It's the quest that we find, that the singer wants to find. But unfortunately, our hero, our protagonist, doesn't find the flowers. So it really says, when is one day a redeeming hero going to come and find the flowers of truth?
Yes.
So it was really the state of Mesoamerican man at that time. He wanted to find the truth. He wanted to get himself out of this kind of
death trap.
Yes, right. Well, and death trap in so many ways. I mean, we all know about the human sacrifices and I mean, the, literal death trap of some of the warring tribes and the prisoners and the religious rites of some of the non-Christian religions and so forth, a death trap in that way, but also I suppose the death trap also of struggling for subsistent living in a difficult land, a harsh environment, food and water and everything else. I mean, life here below is a struggle. It remains a struggle, and man is always looking for hope, isn't he?
Absolutely. In fact, what really kind of exemplifies that struggle that you were talking about and this death trap is in 1487 was the dedication of the temple of the war god. The Mexica or the Aztecs dedicated this temple, and they believed to about 80,000 human sacrifices happened.
I think over what, 3 days?
5 days.
5 days. 80,000.
80,000.
Right, which was at first debated by the scholars, but now they're encountering more through archaeological digs.
They're finding the skulls.
They're finding the
skull racks, aren't they? Yes.
Absolutely. But that was in 1487. But in 1490, a group of non-Mexica or non-Aztecs gathered in a place called Huechoncinco. And it was called by the Lord of Huechoncinco, Lord Tequeyahuatzin. And he brought the poet kings together to contemplate existential ideas, like the existentiality of life, like, like, will my fame last? They were asking questions like that. They were actually saying, what is truth? I mean, really, really deep. How do I know I'm not dreaming
Yes,
right now?
amazing philosophical exploration happening, huh?
And this was so close to the arrival of the Spanish and eventually, the Franciscans that came. This is 1490, so we're just decades away that they had already reached this level. And it's there that one of the poet kings said, the only truth on earth are flower and song.
That's amazing. Gosh, so I can only imagine. Well, there's so many things we could say right now. I'm just skipping ahead quite a lot to reflect on the fact that when someone in this cultural context hears our Lord say in the gospel, "I am the way and the truth and the life," what an amazing breaking through of the fulfillment of all of their hope and longing, not only for meaning in life, but also for the truth itself, who is in the person of Jesus Christ. I can only imagine what that must have meant to them. Do we go there now, or do we talk about the fact that the Franciscans were failing to proclaim that message in a way they could understand it first? I think that's right, because in fact, when the missionaries arrived in 1823, right? 1423.
1523, there were 3 Franciscans.
Okay.
Yeah, and the 1524, 12 more came.
Okay, 12 more came after that. Right. And with great difficulty were they trying to proclaim the gospel to people then, right? What was the problem?
Well, there was a few different problems, right? So we have Hispanics, or the Spaniards that were coming into the Valley of Mexico, and they're trying to convey this gospel, this new information about a God that they hadn't previously heard about. So they weren't familiar with flower world, they weren't familiar with flower and song, so they didn't know the terminology, they didn't understand these ancient belief systems were very rooted, and I use the word rooted on purpose because that has a lot to do with part of the failure. Along with conquistadors, there's a lot of issues.
Sure.
With
not a great example of the gospel always, in the way people were living their lives in the conquest.
Yeah, it was a very nice way to put it. A little bit
diplomatic way.
A little bit scandalous.
Yeah, there was raping and pillaging and stealing and slaughter and I mean, not only that, there was also the gospel motivation really to bring the message of salvation to a people who hadn't heard it yet, but complicated by the real sins and foibles of real human beings, right?
Right. Absolutely. And we have to take or have some mercy on the Franciscans in the sense that they were coming from an embattled world. They had just been dealing with pushing back the Muslims in 1492, and then they're dealing with Martin Luther in 1517, and so everybody's leaving the church at that point. So they're in a more apologetical mode. So they're trying to convince people without knowing how to evangelize them. And what's complicating it is that there's 2 ideological concepts that the Nahua have that are really making them stand off from that. Their word for truth, it's more appropriate to say that it's rooted. They have a word called Nelly, which is associated with the concept of truth. But in order for something to be true, it had to be rooted. Nelly means rooted. So if something wasn't based in their traditions, they couldn't really take it seriously.
I see.
And the second concept that goes along with that is a word called yanquique. And what yanquique means is it means something is false. but also unrooted.
Okay.
And if it's unrooted and false, it's also immoral. So in their mind, Christianity, because it's new, it must be false, therefore unrooted, and therefore not something they can take seriously. So while they had a few adult indigenous baptisms, the majority of the people did not take root with the understanding.
I understand.
We even have a recording of that, something called the colloquios, when the Spanish first arrived. There's a whole conversation between the priests and their tlamatinime, and the wise men, and they're sharing the gospel, and see the indigenous kind of nodding their head and going, okay, that's nice and everything. But at the end of it, their response was, that's really beautiful, but thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, it's a little bit like it's a little bit like St. Paul at the Areopagus, where they say, oh, that's an interesting idea. We'll talk about this tomorrow. You can imagine the Mexica saying, like, mañana, see, that's right.
Exactly.
Mañana, we'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although, isn't it true that St. Juan Diego was one of those people who did actually receive the gospel, that first generation, even
1524, in fact.
And he was baptized, and so he was practicing the Catholic faith as one of the first wave of converts, wasn't he?
Right.
Yes, he was.
The first 12 that came in 1524, there's one priest referred to as Motolonia, which in Nahua means the ragged one, because he always wore ragged clothes, because he always would give away his best clothing to the Nahua, the poor Nahua. So he really endeared himself to the people here. And Motolonia, Friar Motolonia, actually baptized Juan Diego and his wife.
Okay. Yes. So there were a few early converts, but mostly they were missing each other in the communication.
It was a gap. Right.
Okay, so that's important for us to know, because all the more reason why, when we now, in retrospect, can look at the flower songs, we can look at this amazing story like the one that you told, Monique, of Tepeyac and gathering flowers in Atoma, bringing the truth from heaven down to earth. This language is obviously what the Nahua people needed to hear in order to understand the rootedness of the gospel truth. Is that right?
Yeah, because right before Guadalupe appears, you find Zumárraga, explaining to the King of Spain in a letter, this is not working in essence. Might as well pack up and go home. And Our Lady of Guadalupe shows up, and all of a sudden you see the shift in attitude, not only amongst those who hadn't converted, but even those who had converted but didn't fully understand it and weren't giving up their practices.
This is so wonderful. I think that we could probably spend many more hours exploring all the nuances of this pre-story, we might say, the story before the story of the apparitions and what happened there on those marvelous days in December in 1531. But I think, for the sake of brevity in this conversation, just to bring all of these marvelous threads together, let's turn to that now and see what happened, and how, when Our Lady appeared in 1531, she made this man who found himself to be unworthy, that's what he said, she closed that gap between his unworthiness and the truth that she brought, about how those flowers that he gathered were precisely the thing that could convince Bishop Zumárraga that it wasn't, in fact, a lost cause, this project of evangelization. She used languages and symbols to make the truth clearly rooted in the pre-gospel seeds that were already in the flower world of the Nahua people. So let's talk about that, and how this, in fact, is an incredibly happy ending to a beautiful story.
Well, in order to understand this, we have to go to the one account in the Nahuatl language, because this is where you really begin to understand, and it makes a direct connection to the older flower song poems. That would be the Nican Mopoa, which means here it is told. So it's now December 9th, 1531. Everything really seems lost at that point, because it just doesn't seem like these two worlds, the Nahua world and the Christian world, were ever going to connect. So Juan Diego, though, a converted Catholic, he's walking 14 miles that morning to be catechized, actually. And he walks by Tepeyac Hill, where he starts to hear these birds singing, the music echoing off the mountain. He's seeing all these beautiful colors and things. And so the first thing, we even just have to pause there, because the description of that place is identical to what you hear in the flower song poems. It almost seems like, to use computer words, cut and paste. I mean, just the description, even two birds, the trogon and the jingle bell bird, are both mentioned in the Quicapecaut and the Nicamapoa. You know, what are the chances, right?
Yes.
So he finds himself coming into this place, and it's he says, could I be, and using the Nahua term, in Xochitlalpan, in Tonacatlalpan, the flower world paradise, the exact phrase that is found in these flower song poems. He says, could I be in this flower world paradise, the place that my ancestors spoke of? So he's actually making a direct reference. That
Am I there?
Am I there?
Have I
I
gotten
know
there?
this place, but he says my ancient grandparents know of. So he obviously saying that this place that he finds himself in is some sort of ancient place that was brought up in myth. But this is the weird thing about it. It's happening in real life. And then he says to himself, which is really kind of a strange reaction, he says, am I worthy of what I hear? Now, if you connect the ending of the older poem where the singer ends on the question of worthiness, we're now picking up on this new story where Juan Diego is talking about worthiness. Did you want to say?
Well, it's just interesting that that would be his first reaction, right? Because, you know, out of all the things he could say, and as a Christian, you would think he would already be in the mental space of thinking that Christ has made him worthy. And yet in that moment, in encountering this incandescent, shining, singing place, it's like he reverts back to this instinctual Nahua response of, wait, I know about this place, but from a different source. And so he's kind of in a state of wonder. It's one might even wonder if he's in ecstasy, you know, but he's trying to make sense out of it. So he's asking these questions, am I worthy? And connecting himself to the song poems where worthiness is always discussed. Am I worthy of the sweet flowers? You know, kind of in Tokanawaki, make me worthy of these flowers. And maybe this is what's happening in his mind.
Just as a little bit of a tangent and a question there, would he have grown up singing and dancing those songs ritually at the temple? Is that why? I mean, was it a language, the language of that poetry was his vernacular language, right? In the same way that we now might take words from the scriptures. We do it all the time in the English language, for sure. Our language is completely filled. European languages are filled with references to the scriptures, because that's our culture, right? So that response is his instinctive cultural response with a language that was a ritual language that he grew up with.
As a matter of fact, yes. I mean, because he was born in 1474, he was educated in the old ways through the mandatory schools where they were forced to memorize many of the song poems. While the different schools would focus on different things, like one school was focused on military, but there was still a base knowledge that they had to have.
Common culture.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a little tangent, but so back to the story then.
Right. So Juan Diego, you know, you have to understand that perhaps from the Nahua point of view, they're hearing this story and they're saying, well, wait a minute, we know Juan Diego. You know, he's in Cuautitlan. We know his family. We know that he's a real person. We know that he's a commoner. He's what they would have called a masehual, somebody who's not worthy to go to the flower world paradise, just like we are. And how can he, as a commoner, go to this place? But you have to stand back and say, okay, something that was so foreign, these two different belief systems are now being bridged by Christian story. And that's just within the first 9-10 lines of the story.
It's amazing, yes.
So as we progress with the story, he goes to the top of Tepeyaquil because he's trying to find the source of this light. And he finds out that it's this woman, this spiritual being that's up there. And she introduces herself, and this is so important, the language that she uses at this point, because she first says, Juan Diego, things like that, gives comforting words, but she says, know and be sure that I am the mother of, and that word that we were just talking about, Nelly, which means rooted, in the Nahuatl language, she says Inansin, which means the mother of, Inansin Nelly Teot Dios. So she's saying, I am the mother of the one true rooted God. And then she says Dios in Spanish to make sure that we're talking about the Christian God here.
Christian God.
So that's the first thing this says. But then she uses 4 other distinct Nahua terms to talk about the aspects of a one supreme God. So she uses the term Intloquenahuaque. This is just one of them, which means the God of far and near. So now we have to go back to the Cuicapecayot, the earlier song poem, and go to the ending of that song poem, where the singer is lamenting, I cannot go to the flower world paradise because I am worthless and I am full of sin. But only Intloquenahuaque, the God of far and near, can make me worthy to enter the flower world paradise. So if we combine these two concepts together, she is saying, I am the mother of the God of far and near, the one who can make you worthy to enter the flower
So
world
beautiful.
paradise.
So this is, in fact, this is the proclamation of the gospel for the first time in concepts that the
Yes.
Nahua could understand.
Yes.
That's
Absolutely.
it's breathtaking, really, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Blows my mind.
And and thrills my heart, and you think, gosh, for someone to be able to hear that and say, wow, here's the rest of the story.
Yes.
Here's the rest of the story, the story that ended with the unworthy singer in the old poem. And now we understand how not only he can be made worthy by the true God, the one true God, who is the God of far and near, and she is his mother.
Yes.
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 And also, there's so many things that the Nahua people, as we know, the blood sacrifices that occurred with the Mexica, they were very well aware of blood atonement. So there was always that question of how does the God of far and near make you worthy? And, we talked about so much about myth that they had kind of some sort of like distorted understandings perhaps of salvation. But the thing here is that it wasn't by expiation would happen by the spilling of human blood, but their God had given his own blood to wipe away that transgression,
Yes.
to wipe away that unworthiness so that they could then enter the flower of paradise if they chose to do
Yes,
so.
it's right. So that the hope of salvation, which is not one that is cruel or brutal or demands a different kind of personal sacrifice,
Right.
which is my sacrifice of faith.
Yes.
Right.
So as we explain what is really so interesting about the earlier song poem is because it starts out with the protagonist who has a goal that he's either going to achieve or not, it falls into the classic hero story, a la Joseph Campbell, the mono myth, Star Wars or Taken or, all these different Hollywood movies. You always need to have a protagonist and he has to have a goal. So in the case of the older song poem, it was a singer who wanted to find the flowers but didn't. So he falls into the category of a failed hero story, right? So now what's really explained in the Nika Mopoa is that Juan Diego has to go through obstacles. He has to overcome things. He has to convince the bishop, not even in his own native language, to build the temple because that's what the Virgin Mary asked of him. So that's, in a way, the first quest that is given. That as we move through the story, we find out that the bishop needs a sign. And that sign ends up becoming the flowers. So what's interesting is that now the ancient myth is now being put into motion.
Yes.
As soon as the bishop makes that request, it's like, boom, all of a
Yes.
sudden this ancient story is
Yes.
now going to either be fulfilled or not.
Right.
We don't know.
We don't know yet, but so Saint Juan Diego, he goes up to the top of the mountain. He finds these miraculous flowers in the middle of the winter.
Yep.
They're Castilian roses, it's specified.
Yes.
So there's these otherworldly kind of flowers, and he gathers them in his tilma, just like the singer of the past, huh?
And those flowers are the flowers of truth.
Yes, the flowers of truth.
Yeah, that
Those are-
multitude of flowers.
And he
It goes-
doesn't. He
yeah.
doesn't know that, in fact, the miraculous image is there. He doesn't know that.
No, that doesn't happen.
He just wants to show the flowers to the bishop, to Bishop Zumaraga, because here is the sign. The sign is the sign is encapsulated in the flowers.
the
and
the
then-
multitude of flowers, I mean, it's matching the song poem.
Matching the
exactly.
songbook. And
Another cut and paste.
and in fact, the miraculous image of Our Lady is almost extra as far as the fulfillment of the prophecy from the
For the indigenous,
for the
yes.
indigenous people.
Absolutely. I mean, now it's so important to be able to go all the way back to 1500 BC again, because what we saw in the Olmecs, that four-petaled flower, that those flowers are the axis mundi, the connection of the beauty to heaven and earth. And it really comes full circle. In fact, people have written about sacred gestures that we find in different kind of myths. So the gathering of truth in a tilma is a sacred gesture, and Juan Diego fulfills that. And I think that if perhaps you're seeing it from the Nahua point of view, they must have been giving a hooray or something like that.
When they heard it,
When
yes.
they heard it, it was like a 1,000-year cliffhanger.
Yes.
Is somebody going to come along and find the truth?
Yes.
And bring it down the mountain.
And bring down the mountain.
Let's, I think, because again, we could talk about all of these details at great length, and we should at some point. We should continue these conversations. I want to end with, because you reminded me of this, Joseph, of the 4-petal flower on Our Lady's robe that appears right over her womb, because in fact, this is the perfect ending of the story, at least for this conversation, isn't it? Let's talk about that image on her gown, those 4 petals in that place.
So, as we know, that 4-petal flower that appears directly over her womb, if you go back to what we were discussing about the nature of the access mundi, it's 4-petal flower, and then the center goes to the flower world paradise. If you flip it on its side and you put it on her stomach, it's conveying to the indigenous that if you go through the middle of that flower into her womb, you will find the true flower world paradise, the flower of truth, Jesus Christ himself.
So we can look at any image now. I mean, obviously the original one on the tilma here in Mexico City in the Basilica, still miraculously preserved. But in every reproduction, right there is that 4-petaled flower, which is pointing the Nahua and all of us to our blessed Lord right there, who's waiting in her womb to bring this truth to his people and to save us.
Amen.
So as I said, we could explore various aspects of this at greater length, and I hope to do that. And in fact, we're going to do that in person, because both of you are going to be at the Abbey on December 11th for a presentation that you're going to make in person, which of course we will also, I hope, record and share with our friends around the world. But December 11th this year, in preparation for our celebration at the Abbey of Our Lady Guadalupe, you'll be there with us, and we'll continue this marvelous conversation.
We're looking forward to it.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Father.